I was standing out on my front porch that morning, cradling a hot mug of coffee between my hands, just staring out at the patch of land I'd poured myself into over the last few years. My garden wasn't just dirt and flowers, it was peace. It was my reset button after everything fell apart with my ex, Jessica. The divorce had been nasty, dragged-out fights, tears, the whole cliché, and when she finally left, she took half my stuff and every ounce of calm I had left. But here in this quiet little corner of a sleepy Illinois neighborhood, I'd found a sliver of stillness. It was just me and my plants. Roses, tulips, daisies. I took care of them like they were family. I even built a small fence with my own 2 hands to keep it all safe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for a while, that was enough. Until the day a moving truck pulled up 3 houses down. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Just figured we had some new folks moving in, maybe a retired couple looking to slow life down. Then I saw her, stepping out of the passenger side, flipping her hair like she was starring in her own movie. Jessica. My ex-wife. My stomach sank so hard I thought it hit the floor. Of all the places in the world, she had to move into my cul-de-sac? And then came him. I didn't know his name at the time, but I saw him hop out of the driver's seat. Big guy, thick neck, buzz cut, shoulders like a linebacker. The type who probably shouts when he talks and thinks manners are optional. His truck was one of those obnoxiously massive ones, all chrome and roar. The kind of ride you buy when your ego needs to compensate for something. I stood there, just watching them unpack. I hoped they'd keep to themselves. Just live and let live. But hope. Yeah, it doesn't last long when reality sets in. A few days later, I was outside watering the roses when I heard it. His truck growling to life like a beast waking up. I looked up just in time to see him peel out of their driveway and take the corner too sharp, the back end of his truck rolling right over the edge of my lawn. The tires left ugly gashes in the grass I'd spent months keeping neat. It was just grass that time, but it felt like a warning shot. And then it kept happening. Every week, like clockwork, he'd swing wide and leave fresh tire tracks across my yard. I gritted my teeth and patched it up each time, telling myself it wasn't worth picking a fight over. But then one Saturday, I was on my knees planting marigolds when I heard that familiar growl again. Before I could even get up, his truck barreled straight through my garden. Roses, crushed. Tulips, flattened. Petals flew like confetti. The stems snapped like broken bones. I jumped up, heart pounding in my chest, fists clenched. The guy didn't even slow down. Just kept going with the windows down, laughing like it was the highlight of his day. I turned my head and saw Jessica on their porch, sipping something from a glass. Watching me. Smirking. That same smug look she used to flash when she knew she'd won an argument. I couldn't take it anymore. Still covered in dirt, I marched across the street and stopped at the edge of their driveway. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice shaking but steady. The guy hopped out of his truck like he was stepping out of a movie scene. All swagger, wiping his hands on his jeans like he just finished building a dam house. Jessica stayed seated, sipping her drink, clearly enjoying the show. "Do you mind keeping your truck off my lawn?" I said, trying real hard not to lose it right there. He looked me up and down and grinned, showing way too many teeth. "It's just flowers, man. Don't get your panties in a twist." My blood boiled. It's my garden. I've put years into it. He laughed, loud, sharp, and shot Jessica a look like I was some sort of joke. Then she chimed in, her voice oozing with that familiar venom. "Oh, come on, Ryan. Lighten up. Kyle's just being a real man. Not like some people." That hit a nerve. She'd called me not a real man back when we were splitting up too. Like being decent and gentle meant I wasn't enough. Kyle slapped his truck like it was a trusty sidekick. "Maybe you should take up a tougher hobby, bro flowers?" "That's cute." I didn't say another word. Just turned and walked back to my place, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Behind me, they laughed, loud and cruel. And I hated how deep that cut. I patched the lawn up in silence. Tried to let it go. But it didn't stop. It escalated. Every week, new damage. More ruts. Broken stems. My roses were snapped clean through one morning like someone had stomped them. I never caught him doing it directly, But I didn't need to. Then one night, I caught him. It was close to 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I sat in the dark living room with a mug of cold coffee, watching the cameras on my phone. And there he was. A shadow crossing the edge of my yard. Slow. Intentional. A sack slung over his shoulder. My stomach sank. He stopped near the flower beds. Looked around. Then bent down and started pouring something. At first I thought it was trash. Then I saw the way it shimmered in the moonlight. Fine, grainy, white. Salt. A whole damn bag of it. He dumped it in a thick, deliberate line across the soil. My soil. The same patch I'd spent months bringing back to life. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles went white. He wasn't just screwing with me anymore. He was poisoning the ground. Making sure nothing would grow there again. He stood up. Dusted off his hands like it was just another chore. Then slipped back into the shadows like a coward. And I sat there, staring at the screen, watching the grainy video loop again and again. My heart was thudding, but not from fear. From fury. He thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought I was just some pushover ex she used to walk all over. Thought I'd roll over and take it. He had no idea who he was messing with. That was the moment something snapped inside me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't blink. I just planned. Because if he wanted a war, I was going to give him one. But not with fists. Not with screaming matches on the lawn. No. I was going to take back control. My way. It was just past 2 a.m. The street was dead quiet. Not a sound except the low growl of Kyle's truck inching its way toward my property. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but something more electric. Maybe anticipation. Or revenge. I'd spent the whole day working with my buddy Jesse to rig up a surprise, and this was it. Go time. I leaned in closer to the blinds, barely breathing, watching that giant chrome monster of his roll down the cul-de-sac like it owned the place. And just like he always did, Kyle didn't even try to be subtle. He turned the wheel wide, aiming straight for my yard. Then, bam! There was a sharp crack, not super loud, but definitely there. His truck gave a nasty jolt, like it had hit an invisible wall. Kyle's voice cracked through the night, a weird, high-pitched yelp that didn't match his tough guy routine. And right then, the motion-triggered sprinklers activated. Freezing cold water blasted through his open windows and sprayed him full in the face. I heard him start yelling, panicked and cursing, as the ice-cold jets hit him like a slap. Then came the speaker. Jesse had rigged it to play this horrifying, guttural roar, some twisted mashup of demon and hellhound sounds that echoed through the neighborhood like the gates of hell had just opened. It was way louder than I thought it'd be. My own windows rattled from the force. Kyle's truck went crazy, tires spinning in the mud, jerking back and forth. It looked like a panicked animal trying to run for cover. And I was loving every second of it. I grinned wide. It was beautiful chaos. That's when the porch light flipped on across the street. Jessica came stumbling out in her bathrobe, hair a mess. She must have heard the noise and figured something went wrong. She rushed down the porch steps, barefoot, and hit the mat too. Sup? She screamed and jumped back like she'd been shocked by lightning. Kyle! What the hell is going on? She screeched as the sprinklers caught her too, soaking her from top to bottom. I couldn't stay inside anymore. I threw on my jacket, stepped into my boots, and walked out onto my porch like I was just waking up to some odd neighborhood disturbance. Kept my face calm, like butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. The sight in front of me was better than any revenge fantasy I'd played out in my head. Kyle was half out of the truck, one foot stuck deep in the mud, his shirt soaked and plastered to his body. Jessica looked like a drowned rat, holding her robe shut, glaring around like the universe had betrayed her. The demon howl cut off. Jesse had it on a timer, but the sprinklers were still going strong, hissing bursts of water across the wrecked yard. I crossed my arms and leaned casually against the porch rail. "Trouble?" I asked, playing the role of the concerned, clueless neighbor. Kyle spun around, face red with fury. But he didn't speak right away. He was too busy trying to yank his boot out of the muck. Jessica, though. She stormed toward me, nearly slipping on the wet lawn, and jabbed her wet finger in my face. "What did you do, Aaron? This is insane." We're calling the police. I didn't blink. I'd been waiting for that. Please do, I said, cool as ice. I've got weeks of footage, your truck, on my lawn, destroying my property. I think the cops would love to take a look. That shut her up. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. Kyle finally managed to pull his leg free and marched over, fists clenched. Think you're smart, huh? Setting up booby traps like some kind of coward? You're pathetic. I shrugged, didn't flinch. I think it's actually pretty smart. Maybe next time, stay on your side of the damn street. He puffed up, taking another aggressive step, but Jessica grabbed his arm. Kyle, don't, she hissed. It's not worth it. She looked less smug now, shivering in her wet robe. They both just stood there, dripping and glaring, while I stared right back. And for the first time since they'd shown up, I felt like I had the upper hand. I was in control. Kyle muttered something under his breath and stomped away, splashing mud with every step. Jessica shot me one last venom-laced glance before following him. This isn't over, she said over her shoulder. But her voice didn't sound too sure. I stayed outside a while longer, letting the cool air wash over me. My yard was a mess, torn up again, muddy and soaked, but I didn't care. This wasn't about the garden tonight. This was about drawing a line in the dirt and finally holding it. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled up the security footage on my phone. There it was, Kyle getting zapped, drenched, and humiliated. Jessica, too, doing her little lightning dance in the grass. I saved every second. Let them call the cops. Let them try to spin it. I had the receipts. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't the end. But this round, this one was mine. I poured myself another coffee and sat down, a quiet smile tugging at my face. They wanted a war. Fine. I'd just won the first battle. I woke up to the smell of smoke. Groggy, I stumbled to the window, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, and there it was. Flames licking out of my trash can by the curb. Bright orange against the pitch-black night. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone, bolted out in just a t-shirt and boxers, cold air hitting me like a slap, and yanked the garden hose off the porch. The fire wasn't huge, mostly just paper and junk, but that bitter, chemical stink of burning plastic hit me hard. By the time I got the flames under control, the can was half melted, dripping black sludge onto the pavement. I stood there, soaked, barefoot on the wet grass, breathing like I'd just run a mile. But this wasn't some accident. Someone had lit it. And I didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to know who. The house across the street was dark, quiet. Not a flicker of movement. But I knew. Kyle might have been licking his wounds, but Jessica? She was a different kind of vengeful. The kind that doesn't let go. The kind that burns. Back inside, still dripping, I pulled up the camera footage. My gut churned as I watched a hooded figure move through the shadows. Quick, careful, methodical. A lighter flashed. A flame bloomed. The angle was bad. Face hidden. But the shape, the way she moved. I knew it was her. Jessica had stayed just outside the camera's range, ducking the blind spots like she'd studied the layout. Smart. Too smart. I sat there, seething, jaw tight, the rage slow burning through my chest. This wasn't petty anymore. This was dangerous. Arson. And she knew it. But the footage wasn't enough. Not yet. Cops would call it inconclusive, and she'd slink away with that smug little smirk. I needed more. The next day, I spent hours cleaning up the mess, hauling the scorched remains of the trash can to the garage. My thoughts kept spiraling. Kyle didn't show his face, probably told to lay low, but Jessica? She was everywhere. Out on the porch. Watching. Pacing. Her eyes locked on me every time I stepped outside, like she was daring me to flinch. Even the neighbors had started keeping their distance. Whispering behind curtains. Pretending not to see. This wasn't over. I knew she'd try again. So I double-checked all my cameras. Shifted their angles. Reset the traps. I even brought the sprinklers back online in case Kyle got bold. But it was her I was watching for. Jessica had gone off the rails. More unhinged than I'd ever seen her, even during our worst divorce days. I'd embarrassed her golden boy, and she wasn't gonna let that slide. Every sound at night had me jumping. Every shadow on the lawn made me grip my coffee mug a little tighter. I was ready for a long game. Then, out of nowhere, help showed up. It was late afternoon, sun just starting to dip behind the houses, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Brielle, the quiet teenager from 2 houses over, standing there, hands in the pockets of her hoodie. She was always flying that drone of hers, but we'd never talked much outside of neighborly waves. "Hey, Mr. Adams," she said, shifting awkwardly on her feet. I saw what happened with your trash can. And I know who did it." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She glanced behind her like she was making sure no one was watching. "I caught it on drone footage. Jessica. She's been messing with my dog too, so I've been watching her." "You've got it on video?" I asked, barely able to believe it. Brielle nodded and pulled out her phone. Clear as day. And sure enough, there it was. Jessica, in her hoodie, sneaking out of the house with a lighter in her hand. She leaned over my trash can, flicked the flame, and ran. The fire caught fast. The whole thing was visible from above. She glanced around like a guilty teenager and vanished back into the night. I stared at the footage, jaw hanging. "Brielle," I said, "you just became my favorite person on this street." She smirked a little. "She's been awful to everyone, not just you." She airdropped the footage to me right then and there. No hesitation. I thanked her, probably more than once, then shut the door, locked it tight, and went straight to my laptop. Watched the video again. Then again. And with every frame, a calm, steady resolve settled in. She was done. This wasn't blurry, or vague, or debatable. It was crystal clear. Jessica had committed arson, and I had it on video. I burned the file to a flash drive, threw on my coat, and headed straight to the police station. Same officer as last time, Grant, was behind the desk. She looked up from her paperwork, raised an eyebrow. "Back again, Mr. Adams?" I held up the USB like it was a trophy. "Got something new. Jessica Carter lit my trash can on fire the other night. Got the whole thing on video." She plugged it in and watched without a word. I stood there, arms crossed, heart pounding. When the clip ended, she let out a low whistle. "That's her all right," she said, jotting something in her notepad. "Where'd you get this?" "Neighbor kid with a drone. She's had her own issues with Jessica." "Lucky for me." Grant nodded, a faint smirk tugging at her mouth. "Lucky indeed. This is solid. We're picking her up today." Relief hit me like a wave. "Pressing charges?" she asked. "No hesitation," I said. She told me to head home, they'd handle it. And they did. A couple hours later, I was sitting on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee when the cruiser rolled up across the street. I didn't move. Just sipped and watched. Casual. Jessica answered the door still in that damn robe, hair wild, looking like she hadn't slept in days. The cops said something I couldn't hear. Her arms started flying. Her voice jumped an octave. "This is insane. You can't do this," she shrieked, loud enough for the whole block to hear. Didn't matter. Grant stayed calm. The younger officer stepped forward with the cuffs. Jessica froze. Tried to retreat. Too late. They cuffed her on the porch while she kicked and cursed. And then Kyle came storming out, looking ready to swing on someone. "What the hell is going on?" he bellowed. The younger officer blocked his path. "Step back, sir." But Kyle, being Kyle, pointed across the street, right at me. "This is you, isn't it? You little bastard." I didn't say a word. Just met his gaze and took a slow sip of coffee. He tried lunging, but the cop grabbed him and twisted his arm behind his back. Kyle cursed and stumbled, and Jessica kept wailing all the way to the cruiser. The neighbors were watching now. Old Mrs. Hanover on her lawn. Others peeking out their blinds. All eyes were on them, and me. Grant shoved Jessica into the back seat and slammed the door. The other cop stood over Kyle, keeping him in place until Jessica was driven off. I walked to the edge of my porch, hands in my pockets. Kyle glared at me like he could burn me to the ground. "You're dead for this," he said, voice low and hateful. I shrugged. "Maybe. But she lit the fire. Not me. Should have kept her in check." He looked like he might lunge again, but stopped. Just spit on the ground and stormed back inside, slamming the door hard enough to shake the siding. I stood there a little longer, letting the night air cool my skin. Jessica was gone. Locked up. Kyle was stuck. Alone. Helpless. For once. And me. I'd won. Not just a trap. Not just a prank. Real consequences. And they couldn't laugh it off this time. The next morning, the street felt weirdly still, like it was holding its breath. Jessica was behind bars now, charged with arson, and Kyle? He was stuck in that house alone, licking his wounds. I walked out onto the porch with my coffee, half expecting to feel victorious. But when I looked at the yard, the scorched patch where nothing would grow, the busted-up fence, I didn't feel like I'd won. Not completely. I'd landed a solid blow, sure. But the damage, that stuck around. Kyle's truck was still sitting there in their driveway, crusted with dried mud from the night of the trap. I caught a glimpse of him through the front window, pacing like a wild animal in a cage. Jessica was gone, but the anger? That was still parked right across the street. The neighbors started buzzing after that. Old Mrs. Hanover gave me a thumbs up from her garden. A few other folks nodded my way when I passed, more than I'd gotten in years. Word had gotten around. For once, I wasn't the guy they pitied. I was the guy who stood his ground. But it didn't last. A few weeks passed. Jessica got out, bail, probably, and one afternoon a cab pulled up and dropped her off. She didn't even glance my way. Just marched up to their door like she was storming a battlefield. She wasn't wearing that ridiculous robe this time. Jeans. Jacket. Hair pulled back like a no-nonsense villain in a low-budget drama. Kyle came outside a minute later, looking beat down. I spotted a sheriff's car parked just up the block, likely making sure he didn't cross the restraining order I'd slapped on him after the fire. They stayed quiet after that. No more loud truck revving. No more porch drinks. Just this cold, seething silence that hung over the whole cul-de-sac like a storm cloud. But storms don't stay quiet forever. One night, I was out front grabbing the mail when I heard footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. I turned, and there he was. Kyle. He stomped across the street and stopped just shy of the invisible line that restraining order had drawn. His face was twisted, something dark and ugly pulsing behind his eyes. "You happy now?" he asked, voice low, barely holding it together. "You destroyed us. You smug little prick." I didn't even flinch. Just met his stare and kept my voice even. "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "You did. You and Jessica. You tore through my yard. You salted my garden. You lit a fire." He took a step closer, like he was testing me. My phone was in my pocket, already dialed to 911 just in case. "You think you're clever, huh?" he snarled. "Throwing her in jail. Turning this neighborhood against us." I shrugged. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you turned my life into a joke." He opened his mouth to fire back, when a voice cut through the dark. "Leave him alone." We both turned. It was Aiden. Jessica's kid from her first marriage. 14. Quiet. Kept to himself, always had. But here he was, walking down their driveway, face pale but determined. Kyle spun toward him, furious. "Get back inside," he barked. But Aiden didn't move. "No," he said, voice shaking. "You told her to do it. The fire. The garden. Everything. Mom said it was all your idea." I just stood there, stunned. Kyle looked like he'd been sucker-punched. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "She told me last night. Said you pushed her to mess with him. To get back at him." "I heard you," Aiden said, turning his eyes to me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Adams. I thought it was just some stupid prank. I didn't know it would go this far." My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say at first. "It's okay, Aiden," I said, finally finding my voice. "Takes guts to say that. You did good." Aiden nodded, face flushed, and walked back to the house, hands jammed in his hoodie pocket. Kyle just stood there, frozen. His fists clenched. His shoulders sagging. Then he muttered, "This ain't over." But it didn't sound like a threat this time. It sounded like a guy who had nothing left. He turned and trudged back across the street, slamming the door behind him. And me. I stood there, watching the dust settle, letting Aiden's words replay in my head. Kyle had pushed her. Their own kid had turned on them. Their reputation was shot. And I hadn't even had to lift a finger this time. I went back inside, locked up, and poured another cup of coffee. It wasn't victory I felt, not exactly. More like relief, mixed with a kind of ache I couldn't quite explain. They were breaking, and I had finally started to heal. After that night, the one where Aiden stood up to Kyle and the silence finally cracked, things didn't explode like I expected. There was no dramatic confrontation, no last-ditch attempt to burn everything down one more time. It all just unraveled. Quietly. I guess when people like Jessica and Kyle realize they've lost the war, not just legally, but socially, emotionally, they don't scream. They fade. And that's exactly what they did. The neighborhood stayed tense for a while. You could feel it in the way the wind blew through the trees, in the way people stepped out of their houses with a little more caution than before. But it was different now. The tension wasn't aimed at me anymore. It was theirs to carry. Then one morning, I looked out the window and saw a moving truck. No noise. No fuss. Just strangers hauling boxes out of Kyle and Jessica's house. The blinds were down. The porch was empty. And by evening, they were gone. Just like that. No wave goodbye. No slammed doors. No fireworks. I stood on my porch that night with my usual mug of coffee, staring at their now vacant house. The curtains in the front window fluttered slightly in the breeze. The porch light had burned out and nobody had bothered to replace it. There was something ghostly about it, like the house itself was trying to forget who had lived there. And I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding for months. The neighborhood began to breathe too. Mrs. Hanover started tending her flowers again. Brielle flew her drone across the street without worrying about getting yelled at. The quiet couple from 3 houses down planted a new row of sunflowers along their fence. It was like watching color slowly seep back into an old black-and-white photo. As for me, I took my time. The salted patch in my yard still looked like a scar. Nothing had grown there since that night Kyle dumped a whole bag of salt into the soil. But I didn't rush to cover it up. It stood there as a reminder of everything I'd gone through, of how close I came to breaking. But then came the knock. Soft. Almost timid. I opened the door and found Aiden standing there again. His hoodie was too big for him, sleeves pulled over his hands. In his arms, he held a small potted plant, a marigold, just like the ones that used to bloom in the garden before everything turned to ash. "I brought this," he said, holding it out. "For your garden." I stared at it. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "You didn't have to," I said, taking it gently from his hands. "I wanted to," he mumbled, shifting on his feet. "Things are better now. We're somewhere new. She's quieter. Still kind of angry. But not crazy like before. I just didn't want you to think we were all like that." I looked at this kid, the same one who used to toss a football alone in the backyard, who kept his headphones in to drown out the screaming from inside his house, and I felt this strange mix of sadness and pride. "Thank you, Aiden," I said. "This means a lot." He nodded, gave me a small wave, and disappeared down the street. And that marigold? I didn't wait. That same afternoon, I went out back, found the clearest patch of soil I could, and dug a spot near the porch. I planted it there, not over the salted earth, but close enough that the bright yellow petals would be the first thing anyone saw when they passed by. One bloom. A beginning. Over the next few weeks, something inside me loosened. I started rebuilding. One flower, then 2. A neighbor dropped off a few tulip bulbs. Brielle came by and brought me cuttings from her grandma's roses. Even Mrs. Hanover walked over one morning with a small bag of daffodils and just said, "Thought you might like these." The soil softened. Grass started creeping back where the salt had burned. The wooden fence I built years ago, the one Kyle had crushed with his truck, I rebuilt it. Stronger. better anchored. Even the house felt different. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch with my coffee, the cool air brushing against my face, and just watch the garden come alive again under the porch light. It wasn't perfect. Some flowers leaned sideways. Others were late to bloom. But every inch of it was earned. Grown not in peace, but in defiance. And it was mine again. Not long after that, Brielle started stopping by more often. Her scruffy dog, Rusty, would flop down in the middle of my lawn like it was his second home. She'd tell me about school, show me drone videos of raccoons in people's trash cans, laugh like a kid who finally had space to breathe again. The neighborhood was healing. And so was I. Then one night, as the sun sank behind the rooftops and my garden glowed in the last bits of golden light, I sat on the porch, mug warm in my hands, and realized something. I didn't hate them anymore. Not Kyle. Not Jessica. They were gone. Their damage had faded, their noise replaced by wind and bird songs and the buzz of Brielle's drone. And me. I was still here. Still standing. Still growing. The garden wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about reclaiming what they took. It was about taking my peace back. One flower at a time. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.